Today I will be demonstrating how to colour hair using this design by Enys Guerrero from Colouring Heaven Specials issue 88. I will be using Prismacolor pencils. I'm going to start with the girl, and then I'm going to go on to look at the unicorn's mane. Now the first thing to do is to decide on the light source. Although the moon is behind the characters, I'm going to assume that some of the light is falling from above because you need to have highlights and lowlights to give a three-dimensional effect. So in this case, the verticals will be in shadow and the horizontals will be in the light. I'm going to colour the hair in auburn. So I'm going to start by using the darkest colour, burnt ochre, which is PC 943. I'm going to just mark in the areas that are going to be in shadow. So as I said, it's the verticals. When you're colouring hair, you want to use directional strokes, and you're trying to achieve a streaky finish, not a smooth one. You also need to be aware of the fact that hair falls into locks. It's not like one smooth surface. We're lucky with this design, the artist has already marked in the locks for us. So with the darker colour, I'm also going to go over some of the lines between the locks. So I'm going to start with these two sections. The hair will itself be casting some shadows, so this lock here will be casting a shadow underneath it, so I'm going to mark that in. Then down here, this bit's going to be in shadow. This bit's going to be in shadow. Actually, I think I'm going to do a few more areas as well. So I'm going to keep going with the dark. So we've got shadow. Again, marking in the lines between the locks as well. So you need to try and keep your pencils really sharp for doing this. Then if we look at this area here, again, and the artist has marked it in for us, the hair itself is creating shadows. So what you're trying to get is an undulating pattern that kind of goes dark, light, light. You then want to go over the light areas with the lightest colour that you're going to be using. I'm using Eggshell, PC 140. So I'm colouring in all the areas that haven't got the dark. Again, when you do the lines between the locks, you can use a bit more pressure to give a more shadowed effect. doesn't matter if you leave some gaps between the strokes, because we're going to be going over this with a lot of other colours before we're finished. So the gaps will get filled in eventually. Now we get the next darkest colour, which is Pumpkin Orange, PC1032. And we're going to put on a layer using this. And what you want to do is go over the darkest areas and then overlap into the lighter ones. Again, I'm accentuating the lines between the locks. So you're getting a bit of a blend here between the dark area and the light area by using this mid colour. So I'm putting some strokes that go right round from one dark section to the other, just following the lines between the locks. So this area in here is an area of shadow that is being created by the hair. Oops, I've done a dark colour on one of the light areas, so I'm going to use my Derwent rechargeable eraser. Just take that colour off. Now, before I go on to the next stage, I'm going to apply that technique to the rest of the hair. So I'll just sharpen my pencil. So the area under her cheek will be in shadow. So I'm going to colour most of this area with the burnt ochre, as there will be very few highlights. So I'm just covering this whole area with the burnt ochre. And now I'm just picking out some of the other areas that will be in shadow. Her shoulder will be casting a shadow as well. And the areas nearest to her face will all be dark. So you want to keep thinking about the direction of the light source while you're doing this, and keep that consistent all the way through. So the piece of hair here, it will be casting a shadow. And that will be really quite dark, so there won't be any highlights in there at all. Pick up on some of the lines between the locks and accentuate those. Still using all directional strokes. Now, those areas will be highlights, so we want to keep those completely free of the dark brown because the light source is going to be falling on the top of her head. The leaves in her hair will be casting shadows, so I'm filling in those parts. And again, the bit behind her ear is going to be really dark, so I'm making that completely brown, no highlights at all. Now I'm just following some of the lock lines. So I'm using my Faber-Castell drafting brush to clear away all the pieces of pigment that are left over from the dark pencil. And as before, I'm now colouring the lightest areas with the eggshell. So again, think about the light source. So here we go, the top of her head is going to be the lightest area of all. I'm just putting in a bit of ochre there, a bit of burnt ochre there, as I missed an area of shadow. And now I'm using the pumpkin orange again, and I'm putting strokes that go from the dark areas, merging over into the light areas. So in the area by her face, I'm not leaving any light areas at all, because this is going to be our area of darkest shadow. And we want to set a contrast between that and the lighter area, particularly on the top of her head. Again, with the pumpkin orange, you can go over some more of the lock lines. Now, I've just had a look at the area that I've already done, and I'm adding in a few extra areas with the pumpkin orange. It's really important that you stop and take a look at your work sometimes and just have a look and see if it needs to be balanced up. That's particularly important if you're doing one area at a time, so you can get them all to be consistent. Now, to add some really vivid colour to her hair, I'm going to put in some red, and I'm using Scarlet Lake PC 923. If you want to keep her hair more orangey and less red, you don't have to put this Scarlet Lake in. You could use a reddish brown or some more orangey shades. So I'm putting in streaks of the red now, and I am following the lines between the locks. Now what you can find with the Prismacolors is that because they're quite waxy and very opaque, you can use them on top of other colours and they'll still show. So you can see here I'm putting the red on. I've already done a layer of brown and a layer of pumpkin orange, and the red is still going nicely over the top and making a bright colour. So following the lines between the locks. And the addition of the red also has the effect of helping to blend the other colours together. You can put in as much or as little as you want, depending how bright you want it to be. Here we go, I'm putting in the red into the shadowed areas. So I'm concentrating more on the shadowed areas than the highlights. I want to keep the highlights to preserve the three-dimensional effect. So carrying on, putting red strokes in, following the lines of the hair. You can see how this is really starting to make her hair zing and look really three-dimensional. By using different layers of colour, you can build up a real richness. And you can particularly easily do that with hair because you're using the directional strokes. It's easier to leave space between strokes of one colour to add in strokes of another colour. Oops, I've gone over the edge there, so I'm going to use my Derwent eraser. There we go. The Derwent rechargeable eraser, it is quite expensive. It would make a good birthday or Christmas present, but it is much more effective at taking colour off the paper than a conventional rubber, which tends to smear. Also, the good thing about the Derwent eraser is it comes with a fine tip as well as a thicker one. So you can use it to take out small areas of colour. You can even use it if you want to add highlights back into the hair. You can use it to lift a line of colour. Just putting some finishing touches with the red. Now, if you want the hair to look really flame-like, you can add some yellow. So I'm adding yellow highlights using Sunburst Yellow PC917. And I'm putting this into the areas of highlight where I had put the eggshell. Oops, my pencil's broken. Hang on, I'll just have to sharpen it. Prismacolors do have a bit of a tendency to break if you have them very sharp and you press too hard. So that is something to watch out for. Right, it's nice and sharp now. So let's carry on. Try not to press quite so hard. Oh, gone over the edge. There we go, that's got rid of that. So keep on putting in streaks of Sunburst yellow. It doesn't matter if you go over some of the other areas because the colours will blend together nicely. So focusing on this area here, this is catching a lot of the light. Still using directional strokes. Filling in any little areas that are still left white. So if you didn't want to make your auburn hair as bright as this, you could carry on doing more highlights with the eggshell like that. There, yellow highlights done. So the next stage is to introduce more contrast by accentuating the areas of shadow. So I'm taking a dark brown pencil, PC946, and I'm going in and working more on these shadowed areas. Oh, it's crumbled a bit there. Let's just brush that away. So I'm working out from this area shadowed by her face, and I'm extending the lines further along the lines that the artist has already provided. So this bit here is going to be completely in shadow. Then we've got shadow here. All this bit will be in shadow. You could see how much more three-dimensional effect this has started to give. So it's really just a case of going around the drawing, finding all the areas that are in really dark shadow, shading them in. So this bit here, I'll put the shadow going. What you can do by pressing hard at the beginning of your stroke and then reducing the pressure as you continue, you can actually get within the stroke, you can get a gradation from dark to light, so you can pull it up into the rest of the hair and get the effect that it's fading. This bit's going to really be in shadow. Into her hairline. Put a bit of shadow in here. Bit in there. So moving around this part of the head, so this is going to be a darker shadow in here behind the ear, because there won't be any light getting there. This part in here is going to be shadowed by the hair. So on these areas where there's more of a general shadow area, you can just go into these lines between the locks, and then you just put in a few strokes of the darker shade. That just introduces a darker tone rather than making the whole area dark. This area is going to be in shadow here. You can introduce a bit of shadow on the underside of these fronds as well. Make them show up a little bit more. Now to brighten it up even more, I'm going to use another shade of orange, mineral orange, PC1033. Just put in a few strands of that colour. I'm using zigzaggy strokes here because it's quite a light colour. It's just to give an overall orangey tone to some of the areas. And then I'm going to take a very sharp, dark colour, 90% warm grey. I'm going to just put in one or two really dark strokes in the shadowed areas. And again, just to accentuate some of these lines, just to bring in a stronger contrast. And putting in some lines like this just to suggest the individual strands. There. I'm now going to colour just a section of the unicorn's mane to show you how you can apply this technique using a different range of colours. So I'm going to start with a dark shade, which is 50% cool grey, and I'm going to put that into the areas of shadow. So again, looking at where the light is coming from, it's going to be coming from above, so in the same way as with the girl's hair, it's going to be the verticals that will be more in shadow. And the artist has actually marked some of them in for us. So I'm just going to do this section here. So I'm going to start with the grey lines. So you can use this technique for any colour that you want to. The key is using directional strokes and thinking about which areas are going to be in shadow and which are going to be in light. So this is going to be a little bit shadowed as well. Again, I'm running down some of the lines of the locks. Now I'm going to cover the lighter areas with cream. So this is exactly what we did in the previous example. I'm now going to take the next darkest shade, which is 20% cool grey. That is PC1060, so that's going to go up a little bit further into the cream areas. So I've decided that this unicorn is actually going to have a blue mane. So I'm going to take a non-photo blue, and with that I'm going to go over the shadowed areas and then move a bit up into the highlighted areas and follow the lines of the locks. So as we colour over the grey, what you can see is that by putting in that initial layer of grey, it's actually given us several different shades of blue, although we're only using one blue pencil. So we're getting a darker shade of blue here and a lighter shade of blue here. I'm going to accentuate the locks in the lighter area by using sand PC940, and I'm just going to go in to all the areas between the locks. And finally, I'm going to get a darker shade of blue, which is Copenhagen blue, PC906. I'm going to do a bit more work on the shadows. So like we did before, I'm going to go into that's an area of shadow cast by that part of the mane. I'm going to go into that area of shadow, into that area of shadow, draw it out, following the lines of the locks. There, and I'm just going to accentuate these two areas of shadow a little bit more. So I'm going to go back to I'm going to pick up a slightly darker shade, which is the 70% cool grey, and I'm going to do a bit of colouring in there. And that's really all we need to do for the mane, because it doesn't have quite so many areas of shadow as the hair around the girl's face does. But just to finish off, I'm going to rub over quickly the girl's hair with the burnishing pencil. This is a Derwent burnisher. I'm not going to go all the way over. I'm just going to... So all you do with the burnisher is it's a colourless pencil, and what it does is it just pushes the pigment a little bit further into the surface of the paper and blends the colours together a bit more. It also slightly brightens the colours as well. So I'm just going to do it in a couple of areas. There we go. If you would like to see me colour the rest of this design, that video will be released on the Colouring Heaven YouTube channel next Friday at midday UK time.